Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. So it's my pleasure to welcome you to the second technical information session for S-102 St. Lawrence River bathymetry. So today you're going to have a couple of our experts speak to you about the developments in this area from a technical standpoint, what it means, what we're doing, how things are progressing. So we're quite excited to be sharing this with you today. And I think as everyone here, I'm sure knows, the CHS has been undergoing a significant digital transformation over the past few years. We're making some good headway. We expect to be completely functional with digital versions of products and services for the most part by January 2026 to meet the IHO expectations or target with respect to that. So very exciting time for us, and we're glad that you're joining us today to hear more about this. So today you're going to be I'll say hosted really by Louis, who's going to be directing the session, and you're going to have the opportunity to ask questions, to speak with the experts, to share your experiences, thoughts, questions, comments, etc. We welcome it. We want to have your feedback, and so please take every opportunity you have. You've got the right set of people here to do so today. So Louis, without further ado, over to you.
All right, so it's time to get on board. So I'm Louis Maltais. I'm the National Director for Geospatial Services and Support at the Canadian Hydrographic Service. So I'll start with a small intro. After that, my colleague Andrew Roberts will present, the highly technical overview of how we create S-102, how it works in the back end. We'll move to a user. So Pascal is part of the privileged pilots that, help us, fine-tune the specification and really how to define and the use of this information. So Pascal will entertain us for a good 20 minutes. And finally, my colleague Annie Biron she's the regional director of CHS, the Quebec region, will wrap that up and tell you about the project we have for 2025, and also how you can provide feedback, because it's still a new approach. And if everybody behaves correctly, I trust my speaker, including myself, we should have a good half an hour around 2:00 to have a Q&A session where all of the speakers will be available to take your questions. All right. So on my side, my S-102 adventure started in 2008. A lot younger, but really what was the driver is we were working with the St. Lawrence Seaway Corporation, Management Corporation, and they wanted to do more with the high definition bathymetry they had, and really try to maximize using technology, the use of the Seaway, the part west of Montreal, where we have a series of locks all the way to Welland Canal and so on. And at that time, the only standard we had was really, try to generate high density contours and so on. But it was when things are starting to be super complex, you're pushing the limit of a standard. So this is why early on at the international stage, Canada raised that we need a specification under the S-100 that was still fairly young, the idea of this the series of layers to support navigation. So all that to say that it's been a while. I haven't done that full time, of course, but I'm pretty proud today to say we're there. The dream of be able to integrate a bunch of different sources and bring that to the clients in a totally deconflicted way. And this is, to me, I can call it geospatial art, and we'll speak to that a bit later. So we've been at it for already a few years now. So some of the other elements in terms of how to deliver information, we're all busy, and we know that it's impossible to track something as dynamic as a bathymetry on a place like the St. Lawrence River using a pen and a pencil, or having to download information manually and so on. We all know. So the model we're following is data as a service. So basically, we know we want to have a real connection between our services and the user. And as new information is being processed, by CHS, Quebec region. Everything is quickly, quality control and out the door in S-102. The other principle also is you probably notice because you're probably consumer of CHS electronic charts. We're moving aggressively to the national S100 grid. So we're moving away from our traditional paper chart limits that were trying to maximize the data we can fit on, A0 paper page to embracing a more structured approach driven by S100, where the same national grid will be used for RENCs or bathymetry or surface current. So that's the other thing. And then internally, we call it the rule of three. It's that we will never have more than 3 scales at a particular location in Canada. And we're going to produce 3 scales if there is a requirement for it, a navigation driver or another kind of driver. So we feel we're going to get efficiency out of that. Hydrography is a team sport. There's no way we could have accomplished what we are showing to you today in isolation. Government is usually slow. We've partnered with the best in the business, maybe a bit pretentious, but I had the dream team working on that, bringing the best from industry, Primar Electronic Chart Center in Norway, Teledyne Caris, and Navtal and 7Cs now is coming in line to help on the quality control. But, the best in the business to be able to deliver cutting edge service for bathymetry. Canada, as I said, we're at the forefront. In terms of S102 word coverage today, you have St. Lawrence River. In Canada, we're working to, of course, extend S102 coverage out of the Ocean Protection Plan, Council Strait, St. John, New Brunswick, Vancouver Harbor, or part of our first tier that we want to get to. And after that is really going to be driven by our clients, that all of you. And internationally, there's a few ports in Norway that also covered by S102. So as I said, we're leading. CHS, we've been in business since 1883. It's S100, it's all new. We're going to make mistakes. We'll try to anticipate the issues. So that's why it's super important that you get the feedback back to us, because it's not like we've been doing that for 200 years. So, of course, as we develop solutions, we want those solutions to be international in the International Hydrographic Organization spirit. We don't want to have a Canadian solution. We want a solution that is coherent with the rest of the planet. So really a iterative approach, and you're part of it. So I think that's all for my introduction. So strap on, because now Mr. Andrew will discuss the geospatial art, how to cook S102. Andrew, floor is yours.
All right. Thanks, Louis. I hope it lives up to the hype there. So I'll get started with our background. This was, as Louis described, it's a multi-year project. We partnered with Caris and Primar with a lot of help from our internal IT services and Shared Services Canada, who handle a lot of our IT infrastructure. So the first scripts were actually developed by CHS, and then they were handed over to Caris, who transformed them into the software package that we're using today. I would say that it's a software package because it's a complicated series of Python scripts rather than one executable that we're running. So we're using the S102 spec version 2, but there are plans to update that as the new releases are coming out. The release in 2019 was done with CHS testing. I know there's slated for 3.0 release in the coming year. So Caris and Primar, CHS, we're all on board with that. We can make the changes. Currently, CHS is producing S102 cells at 2 levels. We got the 10-meter resolution at level 5 and the 2-meter resolution at level 6. So what we have here is, I suppose, what Louis was calling the art. It's our S102 pipeline overview. You can see we've got 2 kind of main sections, one internal to DFO and then one external. It's all linked between systems with the Python 3.10 software package. Internally on our regional side, we're running the Keras BDB databases where all of our bathymetry is stored. In HQ here in Ottawa, we have a national distribution server, which is running a nightly task that synchronizes the regional data to our national distribution data. From there, we're in that same scheduled task, we're creating the S-102s, which are pushed to the Keras cloud in the external part of this process. From the Keras cloud, they're doing some more processing, and via the Keras feature service API, the new changes will be available for the client subscription services that are run by Primar. So I'll get into more details on each of these processes in the coming slides. So the first bit, which is probably the more complicated, is a regional sync. This is where we have all regions loaded into our CHS NAT Bathy, which is our national distribution database. What we're doing here is a full copy of all online services. So we're mirroring each regional database on our national one. The services are linked by UUIDs and stored as a source FID on our national distribution server, which allows us to maintain a direct link to those original services in the region. They're updated nightly, so we have a scheduled task running at 10 p.m. and that will kick off the first execution of the regional sync Python scripts. Those will pick up any modification to the regional coverages and mark it for update. So this sync is happening in two main steps. It's the outdate and the synchronization. So for the outdate, the scripts are checking the BDB journal, which is the history log of the BDB server. It's checking for any modification since our last run, which is time that's stored in our national database. What it does, it'll fetch all the UUIDs since that run and puts them in a region outdated table, which is again on our national distribution server. So that handles the outdate process. That gets you your list of feature IDs to update. The next part is executing the synchronization, where it goes through all of those UUIDs and fetches the data from the region, moves them onto our national server. If for any reason there's a failure, that surface is marked with a retry count value of 1. So we're able to go in, we're able to see if there's a backlog of if there's any failures, we can check our logs. It really helps with the traceability. Following that, we have the cloud sync. So that will run after the regional sync has completed successfully. Any contributing coverage that's been modified, the cell will be marked for update. So updated cell is compared to the current one, and if it's different, the new version will be transferred. So what's happening here, the regional transfers are moved over to our national distribution server. Any changes that are intersecting with a S-102 cell that the extent's been predefined, that will mark that cell for update. When we're going through the update process, a new combine will be created for that area, and it's compared against the existing S-102. If it's different, the new coverage will be loaded up. So currently we push the CSAR, which is the Keras raster format. It's pushed to the cloud, and then the bag and the S-102 are actually, those formats are generated on the Keras cloud. We do that because the coverage is identical. There's no change there. It's just the wrapper, and it helps with performance updates. We can leverage the cloud infrastructure to crank through any large batches of production that we have. For our cell index, so which cells we're going to maintain in the catalog, that's handled in Keras Cloud as well. And we're actually developing some new administration tools to help us handle that, and that'll all be tied in with our S-128 as well. For the validation of this, it happens on test and through our log monitoring and through Primar. So we have monitoring in each of those areas. The delivery side, as I mentioned before, the Keras Cloud is fully accessible via a REST API, and Primar uses the feature service endpoint of that API to check for any updates. Whenever there is one available, they'll pull the new products and they make them available through their client service, client subscription services. So what we have here is an example of what would be our near real-time update. This is basically a 24-hour turnaround of new products. So on the far left, even before region, you would have the survey teams out on the water collecting data. Those would get to our data management team, and then we would start to see it tacked into this process here. So the CHS staff make any metadata change, including coverage addition or modification or deletion, even if it's a typo fix in one of the fields, that's going to be triggered for an update. We're going to synchronize that over. So at 10 p.m., the scheduled task kicks off on our national distribution server, and the regional changes are mirrored in our national DB. Following that, the regional changes will trigger an update of any intersecting S-102 cells. The new coverages will be diffed against the existing ones, and any new changes will be pushed to the Keras Cloud. On the Keras Cloud, we have the CSAR that's pushed up, and then the BAG and S-102 products are created, and those get fetched by the client subscription service as a Primar and made available to the clients. And that wraps up my section. If there's any questions, I think we have some time at the end to jump to that. Thanks, Louis.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. So I think I still stick to my definition. It's geospatial art. So a lot of moving pieces. So this is the full chain. And one that has been unique over the last 3 or 4 years is I like to, wait to go all the way to the client to validate that what we've built works. So right now, we have heard from the producer, you've heard from some of the tools. We could have multiple distributors, we could have multiple applications and a user. But today, what the story you'll hear from Captain Pascal Rhéaume is, the results of the early testing we did to, fast track and go all the way to the end. Can we make it happen? And I think we're there. But Pascal will describe, how it affects his business. Pascal.
All right. Well, thank you, Louis, for the introduction. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for attending today. As Louis say, I'm in the end of the chain, and I'm one of the few lucky pilots in the world that have been really working with the S-100 technology for a while now. Louis, if you can just come back to the previous slide, please. Here we go. I'm not sure if I can control it from here. Yeah, okay, good. All right, so as I said, I've done more than like 3,000 hours of pilotage now with S-102 in an uncontrolled environment, on real ship, in real life situation. So it gives me a good perspective on how to assess the pros and the cons of this new technology. Of course, S-102 will benefit to many different users for many different purposes. However, this afternoon, I want to emphasize of the use in pilotage context, where the ships are restricted by space or by draft. So S-102 must still be used very carefully by professionals who are trained and aware of the risk involved. And that is very important. It's a part we didn't talk much yet, and we're going to talk about it today. So S-102 should not, as with any other tools, be solely relied on, but it should be used in conjunction also with local knowledge, skills, and especially other positioning method. It's a new technology, and it comes with its adaptation challenge for the mariners, and I'm going to discuss this later. So we can go to the next slide. All right, just a quick reminder, in Canada, pilotage is a in Canada, pilots are the conductors of the vessels and are responsible to the master for the safe navigation of the vessel. That's very important because that's not the case all around the world. Here, pilots are expert for their own area. My challenge, even if they are similar, are not the same as the pilots for different districts. So on the St. Lawrence River, we have huge tidal range, strong and reversing currents, fog, marine mammals, a mix of mud, sand, and rocky for bottom. So, of course, I can only talk about my area. Even if my challenges are similar to the other area, well, I cannot talk for the other pilot. So, of course, S-102 may be used differently in other districts. Can move to the next slide. Right. So in Canada, the pilot objective first is the safe navigation of his ship and also of the other ship. Because as a pilot, I know what to expect from the other ship that have pilot on board. And that's a big key of the safety that we have. The goal of the pilotage, protect the human life, the environment, and of course, the other infrastructure. The pilot possesses the local knowledge. All right. Next slide, please, Louis. I think I don't have control on the slide, so I will just let you know when to change it. Sorry about that. So the pilot, as I say, possesses the local knowledge. We know the bathymetry, we know landmarks, we know the tides, the currents, local regulation, and also, especially in the Quebec province, the working language. Pilotage is a teamwork between the crew that know their ship and the pilot that's an expert in his own area. How do we do that now? We can move to the next slide. Well, how do we safely navigate the ship? First of all, is looking out of the window. That's basic navigation. We are looking outside. We are piloting with visual marks that we learn during our apprenticeship. Those marks have been proven over the times. Some come from Jacques Cartier when he first came on the St. Lawrence River, and others are continuously updated depending on how the landscape change, new towers and stuff like that. So that enables us to pilot even if case of electronic equipment failure. And that is very important. Again, I'm going to discuss that later. The second tool that the pilot use the most is still the radar. It's still indispensable today, especially in restricted visibility, because it's not all the small ships that are equipped with AIS transponders. And AIS cannot be relied on for navigation. It just has way too many defects like transmission delays, errors, spoofing, all these things. And the third way of piloting, used in conjunction with the other, is our PPU. That is similar to an EGDIS, but that we carry on board. It's important to remember that basic navigation techniques will and must always be used. Sorry about that for the S-100 team, but you know, the traditional technique will always be there. They will remain accurate. They are like our barriers against the various errors and interference that we find on board the ship. Now, what's a PPU? Well, a PPU is a portable computer that the pilot brings on board the ship with him. Most of the PPU systems have been developed in conjunction with the pilots for their own need. So there's not so many PPUs that have been made with the major manufacturer of EGDIS. It's a little bit too rough to work with them, I would say. The PPU is connected to the ship's AIS via the pilot plug, so we can get the information, some basic information from the ship. But also as a pilot, we carry our own peripherals on board the ship. What is that? Well, actually, it's a high precision GPS, a rate of turn generator. It could be a heading generator in some case. So like that, we can also be independent from the ship equipment. And that's another key in the pilot job as well. Why do we use PPU? It's a familiar tool for the pilot. It allows us for better situational awareness. It gathers all the necessary information in one place. And that's where it's interesting here, and that's why CHS approached us to work with them. It allows for new technology and new tools to be displayed. The PPU are able to adapt faster to the technology because they are not as restricted as the major manufacturer of EGDIS. Next slide, please. Now, I want to make a reminder to all of you about the S-102. I feel many people are confused sometimes, but S-102 provides depth information at 0 datum. There are no tidal level involved in S-102. That's S-104. It's coming, but we have not been testing it yet. So remember, the chart display in S-102, 0 datum. It's just its high definition bathymetry, give us a lot more information, and it can adapt, as I will explain a little bit later. Also, I want to provide one thing I heard in other presentation is that S-102 goal is to provide up-to-date bathymetric data in near real time, okay? The near is important because the up-to-date data depend on first to have a recent survey and also on the connectivity of the EGDIS or the PPU. It's not live data. As Andrew explained it a couple of minutes ago, it have to be processed and then it is sent to the ship. So those are the two things you have to be cautious about when we talk about S-102. Now on the next slide, what's the great strength of the S-102 with the high density bathymetry? And that is now possible to display the safety contour or the grounding line, as we call it, for the vessel that you're based on in a precise value. Because with S57 or S101, the contours are set with the 2, 5, 10, 15 meters in our area and 20-meter depths. In S102, it's not the case anymore. It will be adapted to the ship and with the safety contour that we tell the PPU to give us. Big advantage for that, it gives the pilot a greater situational awareness. So we can know very quickly if we are approaching that safety contour. In an emergency, it also gives the pilot an additional insight on the options available to him. Next slide. Now, what's that notion of a safety contour? Okay, the safety contour, as I said, is the red line where you don't want to get close to. It can be a fixed value, but it can also be a percentage of the draft of the vessel. So we set a percentage according to the situation that the ship finds herself. If she's stopped at a berth, if she's transiting shallow water, or if she's in an ocean passage, our safety margin is not going to be the same depending on that situation. Many companies already work with a percentage for their safety margin. And personally, that's one part of my work that I did adapt now that I work with S-102. Instead of having a fixed value, I'm using a percentage of the draft. So what I do is I take the maximum draft of the vessel, I add an underkeel margin of error that include the squat at the speed that I'm going to transit, that can also sometimes be found in the safety table. So usually 10% in my case works out. So what's the great advantage of that again? Is that the safety contour display on my chart, same on the right image, is for the ship I'm on. And on this example, it's an 11.1 meter safety contour. On a S57, the ship will most probably have to navigate in the dark blue water because that safety contour is not represented by the fixed contour that we have now with S57. So that is great for the S102, and it allows the pilot and also the crew to see very quickly if we're approaching from the danger zone. I mean, the pilot, we know it already when we are getting closer to the 10 or the 15 meter because of the visual mark we have outside or the distance we use on the radar. But now we are adding another tool to our equipment, and that is the S102. So on the next slide, if we can move, you have another example that is quite interesting because you see on the right, it's light blue. So it's an area where possibly the ship could go, but we are not that sure. But with S102, it clearly shows that I am in the white. So possibly the ship could go there in case of an emergency or if I need contingency plans. So the charts really adapt, which is very nice. However, that's the way it's working. But Next slide, please, Louis. It comes with its shares of change and change in mentality. For the past 5 years that I've been working with CHS, we've been focusing a lot on the development of the display of S-100 norms. We've worked on how to put it on the PPU. I was talking a lot more about the mariner's point of view instead of a pilotage point of view. So now as we move forward towards the operational phase, I feel the need that we need to talk more about the risk involved. What's the ENAV role in the pilotage world as well? And it comes with this challenge because I like this little quote here. It's not because it's white on the chart that it's safe to go there. So the chart may show me it's white, but it depends on so many different factors that I've learned in the past 5 years that, you know, the mariner may have a false sense of security because of what is shown on the chart. And that's where it's very important as we move forward with S-100 that we look into those risks. I know many committees, many people are already looking into these things, but I still want to go over these things with you this afternoon. So, of course, as a pilot, you have to understand that I have to make my decision based, of course, on the situation, where I am, the traffic, the tide, the type of ship, the wind, all of these things, and also the source and the reliability of the data. The local knowledge that the pilot owns will always be essential. Landmarks will remain in case of power failure or equipment breakdown. And believe me, I'm on ship, you know, almost every day. It happened a lot more than you may think. All right. Mariners, like captains, ship's bridge officer, they do not have that similar knowledge that the pilot have and that we base our decision on. So a mariner just looking at his chart may do some wrong decision based on that data because he's not aware of that nugget knowledge. So unfortunately, we've made huge step with the S-100. Canada, as Louis says, is a leader, but it's not tomorrow morning that we're going to be able to make full use of it. And there are a few things that we're going to look at it now in detail. Next slide, please, Louis. So first of all, the advantage of the S-102. The safety contour is adapted to my own ship draft. So I have way better situational awareness looking at the S-57 right now. Again, it's also in conjunction with what I see outside and what I see on my radar, you know. And also a great thing, up-to-date, precise depth information, again, when it's available. Right now, we are in the survey, like the beginning of the season survey period. Also, some dredging operation are made. Like yesterday, I was downbound. I've met the Irene battle doing survey. I'm sure that this afternoon, when I update my electronic chart, the shoals that were in this area will have disappeared from my chart. So S-102 on that is working fantastic. But we have to remember there are some risks with having that much information as well. And those risks were also on the S-57 and S-101, but they were a little bit more clear when we're using the paper chart. And I'm talking about the age of the bathymetric data. It's very difficult right now to find out when was the data that we see on the chart surveyed. Okay, a lot of people don't understand it very well, and many people also voice that out to me that now with the electronic chart, it's not easy to do it. I'm going to come back to that in a couple slides. Also, we have seasonal survey. So right now, my S-102 charts, S-102 charts are updated every couple of days. But in the winter, it's a different story. If the survey vessel is not passing, I don't have those up to date. Connectivity issue for the update. If it doesn't go to the ship or to the pilot, the chart is not updated, of course. We see more and more, not we see more and more, but interoperability, development, and compatibility of software. That could be a problem with the big major like Kongsberg, Transas, all this. I know they are working on it. We're going to get there. And one of the most important one is also the local rule and safety regulation versus the S-100 display norm that are not yet defined. I know EHO is working on it, CHS is working on it, but other organizations are involved when I consider my pilotage job for the safety of the navigation. Now, if we go to the next slide, please, and talking about the age of the survey, this map here is very interesting. It showed the age of the data for my dredge channel, the Traverse Nord, close to Quebec City, and the surrounding area outside of it. And you can see the latest one that are like for the past 5 years are in orange, then in dark green, and then in light green and blue, and go quite old. You see? So in the channel, we have up-to-date data. There's no problem. But I cannot go outside of it. If I look at my chart, I may think that because it's S-102 data, that it's accurate. But actually, it may not. You know, if we don't know the date when it was surveyed, it can give a false sense of safety to the mariners when looking at the chart. Again, it's not because it's white that it necessarily means it's safe. Okay, I know you're going to tell me that information is available on the internet, on some website, but personally, I tried to figure it out, and most of the data is in a GIS or geomatic language, so it's not easily understandable to the common people. And by the way, I want to take the different contacts I have that were able to send me that information, because that was very helpful to me to make that presentation. We can move to the next slide, Louis, please. This is a zoom of that previous chart, and you can see where is the latest data compared to the center of the channel. The white data is up to date, and then you see for the S-102 what has been surveyed on the edge or outside of the channel. So now, is it the best solution to show S-102 data from coast to coast, as we know that the high density data is only in certain sector? Well, that's one question that, you know, I want to ask out loud, and that I've discussed before also, but it will need to be cleared out before we can completely use S-102 as well. Another thing, in the Traverse Nord, the official maintain depth falls under the Waterway Management Department at Canadian Coast Guard. As a pilot, I have to follow their guidelines for underkill clearance and also maximum depth, because they are the authority to it. So it's not because the pilot knows the actual depth of the channel that I can't necessarily use it in normal operation, okay? Same thing with the safety table that we have in the sailing direction that is made by Waterway Management. They have their own parameters to set that up. As a pilot, I have to follow those rules, okay? It's the same also for the passing and meeting restriction with wide beam vessel, the VN 301. It's not the pilot on board this ship that decide how it's going to happen. You know, we have to follow those guidelines. Next step, please. And now talking about the reliability of the survey. I took those pictures, I think, a couple of weeks ago in the Traverse Nord, and you could see the water. It doesn't look like the Caribbean or your pool, that's for sure. So modern survey techniques may not be possible in all areas. Like LiDAR survey cannot be done in most of the water west of the Saguenay River. So it needs to be done with a multi-beam sonar fit on a ship. So that also restrict the amount of new data we can get to the S-102. And outside of the channel, the shallow depth can also restrict the survey vessel, the survey pattern that they are using. I know the budget are not following. So we have to remember that as a user, that some of the information may not be that up to date, okay? We have winter ice. So for sure, at the moment, we cannot have survey during those seasons as well. And another huge point to consider, you see how the water is muddy, is the sanding and the shoaling in this type of water. This is continuously going on. We see it every spring when the survey vessel go by. We have shoals coming, and you see I've put an example. It's more than 0.5 meter in some area for channel. And that is in the dredge channel that is surveyed about 10 times every year. So imagine outside of the channel how much sanding we have there. So if it has not been surveyed for the past 10 years, yes, I think CHS may put a safety margin to what they put on the chart, but as a pilot, I'm not going to take the chance to go into those zones, that's for sure. And unfortunately, we don't have sending tables here in Canada, same as they have in other countries. That's another discussion to have. So how can we add that info to the chart so the mariners are aware of how accurate the soundings that we have around are? I know CADZOC system is there, but that also is a system that is not so well understood by the mariner. So we have like not a decision, but some thinking to do about this before we use that high density bathymetry, especially in an area where it's like muddy and all this. Now I will go outside of only S-102, but what are the other risks involved with the navigation? Well, every day I get on a ship, I see some shipboard error, antenna offset, gyro error, radar error. Those errors are present also on the position on the chart. So it's good to have centimeter precision, supposedly on my GPS. But if the antenna offset is wrong on my ship, then it's wrong. AIS and other signal delay and reliability. We depend a lot on the AIS. We have to be careful about that. Corrupted updates. During the night, if something go wrong, the server doesn't restart itself, we don't get the proper updates in time. That's a problem that's happening quite often. Cutoff of web links for critical information without a proper overlay period. Sorry to say, we had that last week when suddenly one department decided to stop using one website and switching to another. So our PPU are not able to get the shoals and the AVNAV at the moment. We are lucky it's going to be solved pretty quickly, but that's one thing that cannot happen with S-100, where we're going to rely so much on information coming from the outside. Another thing that we have to think about is spoofing and interference. I was reading that last May in South Korea, 200 airplane and 700 ship experienced GPS problem for more than 5 days. So position discrepancies that were probably spoofing from North Korea. So we need to make sure that we can detect that, because that does affect all the electronic equipment that we have on board. That's also one thing. Cybersecurity. I know it is part of the S-100 norms. A lot of people are working on it, but it has to be taken into account when we make those decisions, especially as a pilots. The pilots, we learn how to detect and correct many different errors from the equipment on board. And believe me, most of the time, those errors are even unknown to the ship crew. We teach them that they have an error, okay? And I'm not even talking about training deficiencies, experience or equipment failure, all right? It's a big thing. So that's what we have to think about. And then if we go on the next slide with the ENAV risk, on a larger perspective, what are the human risk of e-navigation? Okay, now people with autonomous vessel, no, we still have humans on board and we have to think about it. And it's not tomorrow that we're going to remove the humans because of what I explained on the previous slide. And humans, one of the dangers is over-reliance on electronic aid and information. Humans are lazy. When we put too much information or too many information in one place, they may stop looking out of the window. And we've seen many accidents happening at sea because of that. The overtrust on the electronic and the S-100 may lead to less situational awareness. Sometimes too much information is as bad as too less information, unfortunately. Okay, so instead of having an increase in situational awareness, a lot of time is the opposite for the people that are unaware of those dangers. Because cluttering a screen with too much data, it may lead that some critical data will be overlooked or some updates may be missed as well on the chart. Okay, so relying too much on electronic navigation may result also in the loss of knowledge and performance when using basic navigation techniques. I've seen it, I'm not that old, but same as Louis, I've been involved for a while with all these things, and I can see it on the ship bridge. People losing touch with radar, with looking outside and just relying only on their sensors. And that's one thing that the pilots, we are there to avoid. Okay, the proficiency, continuous training, and local knowledge. of course, diminish these risks. I'm almost done, don't worry. If we can go to the next slide. What are the next steps that we want to take, or that I suggest we take before we can fully use the S-102 data? Okay, unfortunately, it may still take many years before everything to be set up properly. But now we have to know what will be the threshold for the date of the survey to be displayed in S-102. Should we display the S-102 data coast to coast, same as a normal chart, or just this regularly surveyed area to avoid that false sense of security I was discussing before? What will the local regulators recommend? You know, many people have told me it's to us or to some users committee and to the local regulators to look at that new technology and tell us, okay, that will be the safety rule. That's how we're going to be able to use it to make sure that we stay on the safe side. And also, how are the mariners going to be trained for this new technology? So it's going to be a lot of adaptation. And I've said it before in different presentations, even for me, when I started using S-102, took me a couple voyages to be familiar with it and to realize the advantage, but also the risk of it. So in conclusion, the next slide, S-102 is another tool to help the professional mariner in their job to navigate the ship in critical and restricted water. We should not think it will replace the need for specific knowledge and skills that are required through experience and training with active pilots. So great progress has been made, but there's still a lot to be done and consider. So thank you very much for your attention. Louis, back to you.
All right. Thanks, Pascal. You know, it's super rich, and I really recognize, the pilot wisdom there. It's all about the balance. It's all about, making sure that there's a human, making sure that what the virtual world says versus the actual, and when it starts to drift, the pilot is there. So no, thanks, you're right. You're totally right. There's still work to be done. And again, in Canada, we are ahead of the curve in terms of our expertise to produce S-102, but way ahead in terms of having, this super rich feedback from the pilot community and talking about feedback. And it's important, Pascal, from the stuff that you've raised, there is some elements I feel we could use your feedback to influence another iteration of the S-102 specification or standard relative to the timeliness and so on. So that's super important. Sometimes in those long IHO international meetings, we can create problems that don't really exist. So that's why it's super rich what you're providing. So thanks for that. And we're gonna migrate to Annie, or the regional director of CHS Quebec, to discuss what we have in front of us and the mechanism for feedback.
Merci, Louis. So here's the regional S-102 coverage. So essentially, we're covering the St. Lawrence waterway, or the Montreal to Sault-au-Cochon corridor. There are about 50 10-meter resolution cells and over 300 2-meter resolution cells. We're starting with this first service phase. You'll understand in a sector where our level of confidence is very high, both in terms of data quality and survey frequency. But of course, we are open to increasing the coverage or changing the coverage, and for example, maybe in other port areas. We have already initiated discussion with some of our partners, but don't hesitate to contact us, both users and data providers, if you'd like to help us improve our service offering. And you can, in the next slide, you have a link to access the Primar website. And as the second news today, as we mentioned before, CHS has been working for several years on the various S100 layers. We saw with Pascal just before that sea trials are a fundamental step in the successful implementation of a new product or service. So with the vision of enabling navigators to use the S100 standard starting in January of 2026, CHS and Coast Guard have submitted a project proposal to the IHO, the International Hydrographic Organization, and the proposal was endorsed last May at the Hydrographic Standard and Service Committee. And I'm happy to report that the St. Lawrence River will be designated as an official international S100 test bed. So in this area, all 7 layers of the route monitoring stream, which is the first implementation phase of the S100, will be available. So those layers consist of the S101, which is the electronic navigational chart, the S102, the bathymetric data that we see here, the S104, which is the water level, the S111, the surface current, the S122, the 28, sorry, the product catalog, the S124, the navigational warnings, and S127, the underkill clearance. So if you'd like to find out more, we invite you to read the project proposal by following the link at the bottom of the slide. And essentially in this area, we will be able to enable ECDIS hardware and software developers, and as well as mariners, to test the integration and interoperability of the different product layers in an operational context. And maybe the use of the all this experience that will be acquired we might be able to answer some of the questions that were raised by Pascal previously. So, of course, we plan to host a webinar dedicated to the S100 St. Lawrence test bed, probably in the fall. So stay tuned for this invite. Next slide, please, Louis. So going back to our S102 service offer, so obviously we need your participation and feedback to improve the S102 service and to ensure that it meets your needs and therefore remains relevant. So in terms of availability or access to service, if you have any issues, we invite you to contact Primar directly. So with the email address that you see here, and you can have access to the service by clicking on the link down below. Next slide, please, Louis. Thank you. As far as data quality is concerned, we would like you to contact CHS Info if when you're using S102 product, you observe discrepancies with your own observation or any outliers in the data. So, of course, we will need to know when and where the issue was noticed, what software you were using to visualize the data, and, of course, a description of the problem. We also ask you to keep your data set if possible, as this will make it very much easier for our team when they contact you. And we, of course, invite you to let us know if you have positive experiences too. It's always welcome to know that it's working. Next slide, please, Louis. So yeah, finally, the future is now. So get on board with us. I'd like to take this opportunity to remind you that this is just the beginning in terms of digital services. CHS now offers S102 and S111 via Primar. And I would also like to remind you that although the data is not yet in the official S104 format, there are already water level data being broadcast in real time and even spin forecast data for the corridor between Montreal and Sauto-Cochon. And all charts in Quebec region are in S57 vector format and cut according to the S100 grid. And I know there are a lot of many regional initiatives aimed at developing tools to improve transportation efficiencies here in Quebec. So I encourage you to connect to our service if you haven't already done so. And I also invite you to get involved regionally in the development and implementation of the regional S100 offer. It's important that critical areas of interest for navigation are well served by our electronic services. So again, don't hesitate to contact us to give us your feedback. You are an essential partner in this implementation of the S100 services. So thank you, and back to you.
All right, so we're coming to the, in my view, the most interesting part of the discussion. So, you know, I cannot have a more better speaker team of today. It's 2 o'clock. We still have a full half an hour. If we don't need it, it's fine. You know, back to what Annie mentioned, bringing all of the route monitoring layer between Quebec and Montreal is bringing challenge also in terms of quality control, because you know there's some basic principle. Pascal told us about the basic principle that applies in pilotage. Paper chart is a deconflicted view of what's out there to help the navigator. And that same principle applied in S-100. So one of our challenges as a producer is to make sure that all of these layers, you know, the S-102 fit with the shoal that has been announced in S-124, and will also fit with the sounding that will end up on the chart in S-101. So it also brings challenges. We're going to screw up. It's fine. It's part of the business and it's part of being in the front. So for the questions, please, you can pop up your camera, raise your hand. We're going to use the hand. I can give you the floor to ask your question. I'll do my best to point the question to the right expert. We have the privilege to have fully bilingual panel today. So si vous voulez aller en français, I will do the live translation if you want. Donc, n'hésitez pas si vous voulez aller en français. Puis l'autre chose aussi, je peux aussi, I can monitor the chat window. So if you just want to post your comment or thing on the chat, I'll monitor that. So I had a question for you, Pascal, to break the ice, but we already have hands, so I'll wait to the end if we still have time. Let's go to number 1, Mr. Alexander Ray. And you're the first one to be caught with the mute on.
Ha! Someone had to start. Thanks for calling on me. I'm a researcher with the National Research Council working on hydrotechnical modeling or hydrodynamic modeling, specifically of the St. Lawrence River at the moment. So this is really exciting. I use a lot of the non-for navigation products and routinely download data from the data sets. This is a really exciting service because it pulls everything in one place. But one thing I was thinking about is one of the speakers mentioned there was no datum as part of this product. Is that just for the ship applications, or is there no vertical datum anywhere across any of the uniform surface products?
So I can respond to this one, and if somebody wants to complete. So the point that Pascal wanted to show is it could, you know, as on the paper chart, when you look, or in ENC, if you look at the sounding, that sounding is at tide equals 0 or water level equals 0. So this is not the reality today, you know, in Port of Montreal, tide water, I don't know, I could check in live, but it's probably, you know, I don't know, 2 meters or 1.5, I don't know. So it means to get, you know, the actual water column that you could leverage, you need to take the S-102, that's tide 0, but you need to add the water level. So this is just the clarity that Pascal. So everything, as Annie said, between Quebec and Montreal, we have a super solid reference. So that's chart datum. I know in the research world, chart datum is not a datum that is used often, but with some specialists like Andrew, bringing that S-102 to mean sea level or other datums, IGLD is also one that is used in the Great Lakes and the interconnecting channel. Those are possible conversion. So hopefully it answers your question, but maybe Pascal, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I can. It's a lot of time because especially on the St. Lawrence River, we have tides, high and low tides. So the water level is different every minute basically, and it's not the same all along. So that's why the paper charts are made at what is called a 0 level, and that's what we learn as a training pilot, or that's what the navigator use. And then on top of that, you need to add the water level you have or at the moment, or that you're going to have later in the channel. So that's how we are planning or or tidal window to pass by. That's why we work in conjunction, the chart, the S101 or S102 layer, plus the S104 or spin water level, which will add to the tide. But right now, there is many different issues with that. So that's why I did want to point out, because I see there's a lot of confusion with even some of my colleagues, that when I'm talking about S102, it's at 0 level. You can find the chart number 1, like the heights on the tide are not at the 0 level, they are at the highest level tide that is possible. There's a graphic of which number on the chart is taken from which level. I'm not the technical guy, I'm just a pilot. Sorry.
No, but so
Definitely not just a pilot.
Yeah. So thank you, Alexandre. You know, Pascal, I'm close to give him a offer to bring him at CHS as a hydrographer. He's getting there. So let's go to Howard with the second question.
Good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Howard Paulsons. I work for Transport Canada's Innovation Centre, which is the R&D arm of Transport Canada. So as you may or may not know, Transport Canada has an R&D program for marine autonomous surface ships, and we're working very closely with the National Research Council on this R&D program. So recently, I believe with the assistance of Annie, the IHO, and correct me if I'm wrong, Annie, has agreed that there should be a special group for looking at S-100, for example, related to autonomous ships. And my question is, from the knowledge of this group here, what would be some of the areas that would be discussed at this special group? For example, is there a special format to communicate the S-100 to an autonomous ship? I think the answer is no. How would the human interface? For the IMO mass, there are 4 levels of autonomy. Levels 1 and 2 actually include the human or the master aboard the ship. Level 3 and 4 are basically having a remote control center. So I'm just throwing it out there in my mind to figure out what is this group going to talk about and what would be some of the ideas. It's not an easy question, but maybe some of the knowledge on this line would be able to help me. And we do have someone that will be participating in this special group.
So Annie, do you want to start? And I have a few, maybe I'll follow your lead.
Okay, so yeah, at IHO, 3 years ago, a mass project team, IHO mass project team was created, and it evolved into a working group starting mid-July. I think it's our first meeting. So basically, the project team, its work was to go through all the S-100 layers and see if the standard as we know it would be, would the mass vehicle or mass ship would be able to use that standard the way it is, or there needed to be some tweaks, or it needed to change a bit in order for mass to be able to use the data. So we went through all the layers, and we found out that most of it is okay, but there are some different changes that need to be made. Also, we realized that well, mass operators have not had the opportunity to actually use S-100 data because we haven't really published some yet. We are now, but it's very rare. So we need to have that, again, a sort of a test bed or something, interaction between mass and the S-100 world to know how it will interact together, and if there needs to be other S-100 layers specific to mass, or how we can tweak the streams, the layers that exist right now, to adapt them so that mass operators can use them. And actually, the standards, as we know it, it's really like a container of information. So it's a protocol. It's a way of transferring information structured in a certain way. So if if you decipher, I would say if you know the structure of the sender, you can decipher the information. So mass operator needs to decipher well, get to know that protocol and decipher it for mass operator to use it. So it's this working group will look into how we can better adapt S-100 to mass operation, I would say. I'm not sure if it enters
no,
all
but
your
I think I can complete with some elements. So and you mentioned radio protocol and so on. So today in the S-102 presentation, we haven't talked about the back end, but the services that Pascal is connected to are digitally signed and encrypted. So this is primary expertise, and this is leveraging the latest digital signature that is described in S-100 and encryption. So we're using that. In terms of radio protocol, at CHS, we're data producer, so not the expert in radio communication. This is our colleagues at Canadian Coast Guard. So one of my colleagues is really pushing on both fronts at IHO and also at IMO for SECOM, so the SECOM approach for the radio protocol through the internet to use that. So it's still not final, but we'll deliver data to the internet with encryption, with digital signature. But it could also be another layer. And I'm a bit outside my field of expertise, but I can point you to our experts with Canadian Coast Guard that are looking at the protocol for some of the layer, like video services and navigation warning.
Okay, thank you very much. So as was mentioned, they're going to be using Le Fleuve Saint-Laurent as a test bed for the S-100. So maybe, because I'm from the innovation R&D world, we can do some collaborative research with Innovation Maritime based in Rimouski to actually, and the pilots, of course, to see how it will work or it won't work, just to do some research on that. So
and on the St. Lawrence River internationally, I use St. Lawrence River as its large sense. For sure, Quebec to Montreal or Quebec to Sault-au-Cochon, it's clear we're going to cover that. But marine protected areas, I know it's not part of the route monitoring layers, but there is marine protected area as we go to the estuary and to the Gulf. We could also extend and already in contact with our Burlington office of CHS to also Montreal to Lake Ontario stretch. And you're totally right, Howard. Our data offer from June to December 2025, it's free offer. You're going to get free access to all of the layers to, the real thing. It's not statics file. You're going to be connected exactly to the same pipeline that Pascal is using, but you're going to get all of the different layers. You can use that to support a project. I'm in contact with simulation technology, because one of the comment I guess I got in one of the meeting that Annie was referring to is, people in Australia, we're not going to sail a vessel from Australia just to test S-100. And I'm responding to Australia, you have simulators, just connect your simulators to S-100 services and simulate a few positions in St. Lawrence River, and you'll be able. So, that data offer, take it and do whatever you want with it. All right, so let's move to Monsieur Arsenault.
Thank you, merci Louis. Thank you to all the presenters. I don't have a question. I just wanted to comment on Howard's question or comments regarding the link between MASS and S-100 products. There is this perception that a MASS is something different than an existing ship, and that it will be using some sort of magical data to move around by itself. But in reality, a MASS is just an evolution of an existing ships with automated system or autonomous systems on board, or means of communicating with a rock or not, or being fully autonomous, regardless of the levels, it is still a moving structure that will need and require software to operate, whether they are fed by autonomous or they're fully autonomous, they're monitored, or however they're operated. And there is no one navigation system at this moment that controls a mass. There are numerous systems that are being developed to sustain autonomy, and S-100 is just a new iteration of S-57 with obviously, I'm not trying to minimize what S-100 is. It's a huge improvement at all those multiple layers and everything. But I think all it has to do is communicate with a navigating system that will be approved on a mass, and you got it. I mean, there's no magic. It's just, you could have an active ship right now that is not a mass, like a PPU, like Pascal is using, is testing in the lower St. Lawrence, that uses S-100. And, just push that further, you could have a navigation system, an automated navigation system that is able to read the S-100 format, and then it would help navigate the mass. This is the simple way to see it. There's no magical way to see it. There's not a mass thing that does not exist, that needs a special type of data. It does not exist. That's not how it works. All you need is a navigation system to be able to use the data, and then do your trials, do your tests, see if it's safe or not to do it. But I'm not saying it is or it isn't. But I'm just saying we're not reinventing anything here. We're just improving on something existing, and S-100 will be used by all vessels, regardless of their levels of autonomy, or regardless of they have any autonomy. And for years to come, you still have commercial vessels that will have no autonomy, that will be using S-100 instead of S-57. That's just a normal evolution of the data system. So I don't know if, Howard, it helps you understand better how I see it as a professional pilot, and how we see it at the Center of Expertise on Maritime Pilotage. But it's just, this is how we see it.
Yeah, and
Thank you, Alain.
And if I can follow on that, Alain, I'm going to re-emphasize what Annie said. Get on board, get ready, okay? CHS, we're data producer. We don't have this privileged relationship with software manufacturer, PPU simulators. This is the user. I'm sure in the virtual room today, we have some of that. Of course, with the Pascal Corporation of Pilotage, we were lucky enough to work with CIQ, piloting software, super agile, professional, quick on their feet to adjust. But we need more of these, We need to be able to see, okay, what is the CIQ implementation? What about the NADSIM implication? And in my own view, like Pascal said, PPU is a great place to innovate because it's not fully regulated. The pilot in Canada has the control of tools to do his business. So it's a great place, and this is why we tap there. What I can look in my crystal ball is the best practices from the PPU will probably migrate to the full like this system. So S-100 like this, it's gonna happen at some point. But they will face the same issue, and maybe they could leverage. So, again, the call to you is don't wait for June 2025 to say, oh, I should have emailed my software provider, office use, on the vessel, simulator, whatever, to say, hey, it would be nice if we could leverage this thing to create our own project, or create our own project. So you have that relationship, you have that business relationship, so you can highly influence that. But of course, as Annie mentioned, we're gonna do a webinar specific to this crowd to make sure that over the winter, if they can fit that in the development iteration. So we have a few applications. So again, to the Research Council, I don't know which kind of software you use to do your thing, but in terms of test data sets and so on, use Annie, use me, and we'll make sure that the offer is for everyone here. Test data set is easy. We can do 101, 102. We have this capacity. All right, so I went to the chat. So thanks, Phil. Water level in Montreal is about 50 centimeter. So I was a bit ambitious, but we're never happy. St. Lawrence, it's good to go under the bridge, and maybe under keel at 50 centimeters is starting to be, I don't know, an issue. So I'll go my question, Pascal. Don't worry, it's not a technical one. And we'll do another round. So we'll go to Evgeny after. Pascal, I want to know what's the reaction from the master. You're doing a lot of ships. You've done, many different ships. Reaction that you're getting with your gizmo, with the data in. What is the typical reaction from the master or from the bridge people? They don't care, or what's the typical?
Well, I meet a lot of different people, different age, different experience, different interest as well. I can tell you we have some people that, usually the crew doesn't really look at their PPU. They have their EGDIS, so they monitor with their own equipment. So they are not using our own PPU. But I do meet some younger officer or captains that look at it and ask me questions. And then even some colleagues also. And I get all type of reaction. I get the first reaction that is, stopping and be like, oh my God, to have a chart moving and displaying different information from what I used to see and to know from the fixed paper chart, they kind of completely block. And I have to say, I almost had the same reaction the first time I used S-102. So I can understand them. It's not easy to see the dynamic products, or as I used to say it, like it's the chart adapting to the ship and not the ship, it's the chart adapting to the user and not the user adapting to the chart. It takes a while to get used to it, same as with any new technology. So I see people that are, slow on technological advancement, which are like, oh, I'm not sure about it. But I also meet some younger officer, and younger doesn't mean the age, it just means the attitude, that are very interested into it. And we have some very good conversation about it, and they explain me their reality, especially about, when we are navigating in that blue area I was talking to you about. I was reading an incident report that happened in New Brunswick, that if it will not have been the 20-meter fixed contour shown on the chart, maybe that accident will not have happened. Another officer was telling me to go in a small port with tidal water because the tide level is not represented on the chart now. They do have to go inside the dark blue water, but they actually cheat on the chart to make it look more closer to reality, which is not a good idea, of course. So I see all reaction.
Okay, all right. Okay.
So I've had that discussion with the chief officer on one ship the other day, a young guy, and Canadian, and it was very interesting. And I get some from other culture as well, which I was very interested. Some people are too much about technology. I read that also all the time. That's why I did the type of presentation I did today, because some people think I'm going to quote Alain, that's a magical tool that will enable us to sail everywhere and just, zigzag in between the shoal with those huge mega container ship. And every time I'm like, whoa, time out here. It's not because it's there that it's actually proper to do it. When I was making a presentation, about when it's white on the chart doesn't maybe mean you cannot go there. It's true. It's like cave diving. If you just look at the chart, you may think, oh, it's white, I can go, but you have to look further out, and you have to take into account the source of the data. That's one point I wanted to bring up about the date of the survey. It's quite fascinating, since I work with CHS, how much I've learned on how the charts are made, and pilots, the way we are using the chart. We are using data that is very old. Like I remember one island that kind of shrank for 7 meters, but just the data for the height was taken by sextant vertical anchor in the 80s, in the 1800s. So I was like, oh, okay. But then with modern techniques, they realized it was not the proper height. So for depth in the critical channel, we have the proper information. But if a user think, oh, I'm going to go out of the channel and then I don't need, pilots or local knowledge and stuff like that because the charts show me is there. Well, actually not. We have plenty of people from the hydrography world here. You know that CAD-ZOC level is quite interesting how we should take into account when we do the voyage plan with the CAD-ZOC, what we kind of should add to our underkeel clearance allowance.
No,
to
it's
take
a, it's
that
a
into
really, yeah,
account.
you're right. And, it's a dynamic environment. And also, with the other layers, it's going to be more and more dynamic. So let's go to, so we still have 5 minutes to go. Let's go to Mr. Evgeny at Transport. Evgeny? And if you're speaking, we don't hear you. So as Evgeny will troubleshoot his microphone, let's go to Jonathan.
Hi. Yeah, I was thinking about what you told Pascal earlier about the time of the survey, and I wonder how much. First, two things brought to mind is that would it be too much information for you to have that date on your PPU as a filter or something like that? Because how did you feel with the quantity of information that you had with the S-102?
That's the thing that it's still kind of a work in progress in my mind. I'm going to say on the paper chart, they used to be somewhere in over the land, a small reproduction of the chart with the zones of where the dates of the survey were taken. So that was a way to know it. I know now you can query the chart and to see the information, but the date of the survey is not in that. To go on the NONA website to try to find out, and even some hydrographers told me they were finding it hard to find the information, and you need to be aware of it. It's not a user-friendly site for non-GIS people. How to set it on the chart? Could it be a layer that you switch on or off when you do your voyage planning? That could be a great option.
Yeah.
Same as what they provide me, but it's not in the norm. So now we're really thinking far ahead.
But maybe as we'll continue to challenge IHO with our ideas in Canada, something that comes to mind, and Jonathan, the temporal aspect is really important. But Pascal said it. It's all about the domain awareness, and our colleagues at Coast Guard that are managing the dredging of the river, they know the river well, and they're running their dredging program. When they know that we can expect shoaling and stuff like that. So with time, again, the local knowledge of the pilot will continue to improve because, what was, maybe in the head of a few people managing dredging, well, now it's more democratic. Everybody know about it. And, maybe Pascal, it's an information that he doesn't need because he will understand, when, on the eastbound, on the east side or north side of, I don't know, Saint-François channel, this space is stable, and this is why, I see 1990 data because it's pretty stable as at your territory, Pascal, but I know Bécancour River, the output is close to the maintenance channel. This is the most surveyed part of the St. Lawrence River because, we have silting, the Bécancour River just shoot everything there. So that knowledge that, I think it's going to continue to grow, have more people involved there. But the temporal aspect, I can tell you, it's complex as CHS in our bathymetric management daily. I can tell you we have passionate debate within CHS relative to the temporal management. So let's go to Evgeny. Hopefully the mic is working. Oui, vas-y, complète.
Just the way that I see it right now on a kind of a short-term basis, personally, I think, especially for the St. Lawrence River, where we have huge water, but with a very narrow part of where we can navigate. And that's also what's complex here, because when you look out of the window, you see a lot of water, but actually you can just stay in the middle. So I think what we should look into for S-102 is to restrict that S-102 layer to area where you have surveys, let's say every year or less than that. Anything that is outside of that, someone will have to determine a margin should be shown as S-101. So the normal view that we see, but in the channel, or if it's surveyed a little bit on the edge, that part could be shown as high density bathymetry, but everything else outside to be shown as the normal paper chart that we see. So like that, the navigator would right away be aware, okay, those safety contours are the fixed one, you know, the one that adapt are where they are surveyed. So there will be no confusion.
Yeah, and this is the kind of wizardry that Andrew has access to a bunch of buttons. And this is exactly, you know, we're speaking, it's a community discussion and we can improve. So the last question goes to Mr. Abchenko.
Hopefully it works this time. My apologies. My team let me down just in the perfect timing. I know the time is up, so really briefly, thank you very much for amazing presentation, and it really shows the progress, right? It shows the like how it was and what it is. So it's really informative. Thank you very much for explaining the process of validating and pushing the data through. And the most importantly for me, the best validation is the having real pilot testing it, and 100% agree with Pascal. And maybe it's not always easy for you to hear the tough points that are brought by him, but this is really, it takes a, I mean, this is the best way to validate reality and the model. So that's my main point, to thank you for great presentation and for, you know, those limitations that Pascal voiced. 100% agree with those limitations to the model what he put, and that's probably the best way forward to, you know, to consider it. Yeah. So yeah, I just recently came from IMO meeting and CSR. So there was an IHO paper describing the progress of S-100 presented to maritime community. So that's something I wanted to mention as well. And at IMO headquarters in London, there is a terminal, S-100 terminal. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that great yet. So it looks like big iPad, and really, I mean, hopefully it's gonna get better. But yeah, it's congratulations on result, you know, and on particular, you know, on these great presentations.
Yeah, no, thank you, Evgeny. And, you know, I think you just wrapped the meeting up with that from those wise words from Transport Canada. So thanks for being part of that session. Merci, Annie. Thanks, Andrew. Thank you a lot, Pascal. You're bringing a lot of value for that full continuum. Collaboration is not over. So back to what Annie said, future is now, get ready. Expect an email from me next week with the YouTube link to the session and also the material that we've shared with you. Video is not fully released yet, so probably will not include that in the package, but it will be officially released in the next couple of weeks. I don't know. On that, have a good end of your day. Bye-bye.